and I pity the girls of Stratton House," Jacquetta Redmond said, setting down her wineglass before she knew the rude guest owned every roof at the table. For one clean second, the Redmond dining room forgot to breathe. Her father leaned close, his face gone bloodless above his starched cravat. "Jacquetta," he whispered, so low the candle flames seemed to bend toward him. "That is the Duke." Across the polished mahogany, Hugh Stratton did not rise. He did not rebuke her. He only watched her over the silver branch of candles, dark coat immaculate, a jeweled star pinned at his breast, his expression as calm as winter water. Jacquetta felt the stem of the glass biting into her fingers. The wine had been poor. The company had been worse. The gentleman seated opposite her had spent the fish course dismissing the parish girls' school as a sentimental experiment that taught poor girls notions above their station. He had said it without heat, which made it more insulting. He had not sounded cruel. He had sounded correct. So Jacquetta had answered. Now she knew he was Hugh Stratton, Duke of Stratton, newly returned from London to take up his Hampshire seat. Her father's cottage stood on Stratton land. The parish school stood on Stratton land. Every roof she had meant to protect could be lifted from its place by the man she had just contradicted at dinner. Inside her reticule, pressed against her knee, lay a folded blue half-sheet of paper. It was a reference, if one was generous. It had once praised her handwriting, her sums, and her ability to keep girls orderly. Twice, former employers had crossed out those virtues and written the true charge beneath them. Too forward with opinions. Jacquetta had kept the paper because no one else kept an honest record of her. She summoned her brightest smile. It was the sort of smile that promised she had meant no harm, felt no fear, and would gladly pour tea until the whole table forgot she possessed a mind. It had saved her more often than tears ever could. "I would teach a girl, Your Grace," she said, her voice clear enough to cross the table, "that truth is not an offense simply because it inconveniences the person hearing it." Her father made a soft, strangled sound. Lady Martin, seated near the footman, lowered her eyes to her plate. Two county wives exchanged a look that had already begun turning into a story. The old squire beside Jacquetta leaned away from her, as if candour were contagious. The Duke's gaze did not move. "Inconvenience," he repeated. "An ambitious lesson, Miss Redmond. Only a necessary one." Her father tried to rescue what remained of the evening. "Your Grace, my daughter is devoted to her parish work." She speaks with more warmth than caution. "No," said the Duke. The single word chilled the room. Jacquetta's smile held. She had learned to keep it in place when a mistress dismissed her, when a vicar's wife corrected her vows, when a mother withdrew her child because Miss Redmond encouraged questions. The brighter she appeared, the less anyone searched for the bruise beneath. Hugh Stratton looked at her as though he could see the bruise anyway. "She speaks," he said, "as if she is paid for every sentence." No one knew what to make of that. Neither did Jacquetta. The rest of the dinner continued with a politeness so strained it might have cracked the china. Jacquetta carved, poured, answered, passed the salt, and smiled whenever her father's frightened eyes found hers. By the time the ladies withdrew, she had made herself useful enough to appear harmless. Only once, as she lifted the wine decanter from the sideboard, did she catch the Duke still watching her. Not offended, interested. That was somehow worse. The next morning, when the heavy wheels of a ducal carriage stopped outside the little parish school, every girl turned from her slate. Jacquetta did not. She corrected a crooked sum and told herself that a duke did not come in person to ruin a schoolmistress before noon. He sent a steward, or silence, which was usually crueler. The door opened. Cold air entered first. Hugh Stratton followed. He looked too large for the low room. Hat in hand, dark greatcoat powdered with road dust, face composed as if no living soul had ever hurried him. The 12 girls rose in a nervous rustle. "Sit," Jacquetta told them gently. They obeyed her, not him. The Duke noticed. "Miss Redmond," he said. "Your Grace." She curtsied with all the calm she had left. "If you have come regarding the lease, I hope you will allow the trustees to hear the accounts before judgment is made." "I have come regarding my cousin." Jacquetta blinked. "Flora Pennington," he continued. 13. Mother dead. Father inattentive. Presently at Stratton House. She answers every question with the last sentence spoken by the person nearest to her. A few girls looked down at their slates, startled by the accuracy of it. Jacquetta kept her face still. "And you wish me to correct this defect?" "I wish you to instruct her for 3 weeks. At Stratton House." There it was. Not ruin. Something more dangerous. "You have proper governesses, Your Grace." "I have women who teach obedience and call it accomplishment." His gaze moved once across the little room. The patched map, the slate dust, the girls in plain gowns sitting with their hands folded too tightly. "You appear to teach something else." Jacquetta's smile returned before she could stop it. "Impertinence, according to several respectable households. Useful impertinence, if directed with care." A strange compliment. It was not meant as one. No, she thought. He would not waste a compliment where an inspection would do. He placed a folded paper on her desk. "Your wage, your hours. Mrs. Vale, the housekeeper, will ensure all propriety is observed. You will teach Flora in the East schoolroom. You will also give me an honest account of what in my household makes the girl afraid to think." The girls were listening with their whole faces. Jacquetta lowered her voice. "You ask me to spy for you. I ask you to look. And if I dislike what I see, then I expect you will say so." It should have been simple to refuse. A woman with independence could have refused. A woman whose father's tenancy did not depend upon Stratton goodwill could have refused. A woman with 3 clean references could have refused. Jacquetta had none of those things. She touched the edge of the blue letter through her reticule. It felt thin as a leaf and heavy as a chain. "I am a schoolmistress, Your Grace," she said, "not a decoration for your conscience." For the first time, something like surprise crossed his face. It vanished almost instantly. "No," he said. "That is why I came." She accepted before fear could make her polite. Stratton House received Jacquetta as if she were a parcel delivered to the wrong entrance. Its marble hall rose in cold, pale plains, all portraits, pillars, and silence. Footmen moved without sound. The air smelled of beeswax and rules. Jacquetta stood with one small trunk and her reticule, feeling neither servant nor guest, which was to say, she had no place at all. Mr. Cornelius Dunmore, the Duke's steward and adviser, gave her one immediately. "Miss Redmond, from the parish room," he announced, as if parish room were a stain. "You will keep to the East schoolroom. Meals will be taken with Mrs. Vale, unless invited otherwise. His Grace is occupied with matters of consequence. You need not trouble him." Beside him stood Lady Felicity Ellington, all pale silk, smooth gloves, and perfect breeding. The county had already decided she would make an excellent Duchess of Stratton. She looked at Jacquetta as one might look at a ribbon chosen in poor taste. "How energetic of you to come," Lady Felicity said. though I cannot imagine what a village teacher might offer Flora that a trained governess could not. Jacquetta gave her most luminous smile. It cost her nothing now. She had spent it too often. Perhaps the novelty of being asked what she thinks, my lady. Mr. Dunmore's mouth tightened. Lady Felicity's did not. She was too practiced to reveal a wound. How very lively, she murmured. In the East schoolroom, Jacquetta found Flora Pennington sitting straight backed at a desk, a book open before her, and terror in her eyes. The child had fair hair braided too tightly, ink on one finger, and the air of someone who had been praised only for disappearing. "What is the capital of Portugal?" Jacquetta asked after the introductions. "Lisbon," Flora whispered. "Excellent. What colour is Lisbon?" Flora stared at her. "There is no correct answer," Jacquetta said. That frightened the girl more. For 3 days, Jacquetta pushed aside the stiff recitations. She asked Flora about the gardens, the servants' bells, the books she pretended not to read, the weather over the downs. At first, Flora answered as if walking on rotten boards. Then, slowly, words began arriving in her own order. Hugh appeared often in the doorway. He never announced himself. He stood with one hand behind his back, dark and still, while Jacquetta bent over Flora's slate. His presence made the footmen straighten in the corridor. It made maids lower their trays. It made Flora's answers shrink. On the 4th afternoon, Jacquetta closed the lesson book without looking at him. "Your Grace, if you wish to observe, you may sit." Flora stopped breathing. The Duke did not move. "This is a schoolroom," Jacquetta said, still pleasantly. "Doors are for entering or leaving. Hovering belongs to ghosts." The smallest sound escaped Flora. It might have been terror. It might have been a laugh. Hugh's eyes fixed on Jacquetta. Then he stepped inside and took the chair nearest the window. The next question Jacquetta gave Flora was easy. The child answered it incorrectly. No one scolded her. Jacquetta saw Hugh's hand tighten once on the chair arm. She saw him master the old reflex, whatever it was, and say nothing. After that, he sat more often. He did not soften all at once. Men like him did not melt because a woman corrected their manners. But small things changed. A footman who dropped a salver was told to fetch a cloth, not threatened with dismissal. A maid carrying coals was no longer made to wait while gentlemen argued in the passage. Flora was permitted to choose which book she read after supper. "You do not drill her on dates," Hugh said one afternoon, when Flora had gone with Mrs. Vale for tea. "Dates are easily memorized, Your Grace. Courage is not." Courage? A girl afraid of being wrong becomes a woman afraid of being right. His face went still in that particular way she was beginning to read. Not coldness, impact concealed. "And were you such a girl?" he asked. Jacquetta smiled. "I was worse. I was right aloud." He looked at her mouth, not in impropriety, but as if he were trying to understand how a smile could carry so much fatigue. "That must have cost you." Not everyone considers truth a virtue in a paid companion. "You were a companion?" "And a governess, briefly. In houses where young ladies were expected to have opinions only after marriage, and then only if their husbands supplied them." A faint line appeared between his brows. Before he could ask, more footsteps approached. Mrs. Vale entered with a tray, and the moment closed properly under the eyes of a chaperone and the smell of weak tea. It should have stayed closed. The blue letter opened it. Jacquetta had tucked it inside a grammar book because her reticule clasp had broken. Flora reached for the book too quickly, and the paper slipped free. It fluttered to the carpet, pale blue against the dark weave. Hugh picked it up before Jacquetta could. Your Grace. He had already seen the crossed lines. Too forward with opinions, unsuited to a household requiring discretion, inclined to disturb young ladies with unnecessary questions. Heat rose into Jacquetta's face. Not shame, exactly. Something older and more tiring. She could bear insult when it came dressed for company. She could answer it, smile through it, make it bow without knowing why. But to have him see the little inventory of her failures, the private museum of every door closed against her, that was worse. Flora looked from one adult to the other and went very still. Hugh folded the paper along its old crease. Was the opinion wrong? He asked. Jacquetta could not answer at first. He did not sound mocking. He did not sound kind. He sounded as if the answer mattered. No, she said. It was merely inconvenient. The faintest change passed through his expression. A crack not open enough for warmth, but enough to prove warmth existed behind the stone. He placed the blue paper on the desk, not into her hand. He gave her the dignity of choosing whether to take it back. Then the paper is poorly worded, he said. It was an absurdly small defense. Jacquetta turned her face toward the window, because tears, if allowed, would have made the whole thing less bearable. Her smile came of habit, but it faltered halfway. She recovered it quickly. Hugh saw that too. For the rest of the afternoon, Jacquetta felt the absence of the paper's secrecy as sharply as if she had misplaced a garment. The girls read. Flora answered. Hugh left without another word. Yet everything had altered, because one person in the house now knew exactly where to strike if he chose to. When Mrs. Vale sent word that Miss Redmond was expected at supper, Jacquetta stood before the small looking-glass in her chamber and practiced the smile until it fitted again. Not too bright. Brightness invited suspicion now. Not too pale. Paleness invited pity. She pinned up one loose curl, touched the broken clasp of her reticule, and slid the blue letter back inside. Then she breathed once, twice, and put on her courage as carefully as another woman might put on diamonds. The supper that broke him began with turtle soup and ended with silence. Jacquetta had not expected to be seated at the Duke's table. Mr. Dunmore had objected, Lady Felicity had smiled, and Hugh had said only, Miss Redmond may hear what passes for education among us. So she sat far down the long table, where the candlelight reached thinly, and the ladies could pretend she was not quite present. Lady Felicity presided near the centre with easy command. She praised the county, the tenants, the weather, and Hugh's judgment, in precisely the order most flattering to herself. Miss Redmond has such energy, she said at last, turning her glass between gloved fingers. One admires zeal in its proper sphere, but lower rank sometimes mistakes enthusiasm for license. A gentleman coughed into his napkin. Jacquetta took a sip of water. Her smile settled into place. Mr. Dunmore leaned forward. Indeed, I have reviewed Miss Redmond's notes on Flora Pennington's progress. They are vivid, certainly. I shall translate them into language fit for His Grace's consideration. The knife in Hugh's hand stilled. Jacquetta set down her glass. The small sound carried. Proper language, Mr. Dunmore, she said, too often means a lie wearing gloves. I wrote what I observed. The table went dead silent. Lady Felicity's eyes brightened with triumph. There, you see? This is exactly the want of restraint I feared. A woman may possess cleverness and still lack breeding. Jacquetta felt each face turn toward Hugh. This was the moment when great men restored order. A duke need not be cruel to destroy a woman. He only had to look embarrassed by her. Hugh did not look at Jacquetta. He looked at Mr. Dunmore. You will not alter Miss Redmond's reports. Mr. Dunmore's colour deepened. Your Grace, my concern is only that I might encounter an unsoftened truth. Hugh's voice remained low. That made it worse. I asked for such a thing because I had begun to suspect no one in this house remembered how to provide it. Lady Felicity's smile thinned. Surely you do not mean to place a parish teacher's judgment above that of your own household? I mean, Hugh said that Miss Redmond appears to be the only person at this table who has not mistaken fear for loyalty. No one spoke after that. Later, with Mrs. Vale lingering near the gallery door, Jacquetta found him before the portrait of the late Duke. The painted man looked much like Hugh, drained of mercy. You should not have done that, Jacquetta said. No. It will cost you peace in your own house. I have never had peace in this house. The answer was so plain that her own words deserted her. Hugh rested one hand on the marble console beneath the portrait. His knuckles were white. He trained me to stand still, he said. When I was a boy, I mistook stillness for strength. Later, others mistook it for character. Jacquetta looked up at the dead Duke's painted eyes. And now? Now I am not certain there is a difference. There was no self-pity in him. That was what undid her. He did not ask her to comfort him. He offered the truth, as if placing a weapon on a table. She stepped no closer. A house like this counted inches between unmarried people. Your rudeness is not arrogance, Your Grace, she said. It is a house rule that learned to speak with your voice. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the Duke of Stratton was not a duke at all. He was a man who had survived by becoming the room that hurt him. When he opened his eyes again, something in them had shifted. You smile, he said, whenever you are cornered. Jacquetta's breath caught. There it is, he murmured, not unkindly. You did it just now. She had. Her mouth ached with the shape of bravery. The mirror between them turned the next afternoon in the east schoolroom among slates, chalk, and a broken fire screen. Rain tapped at the window. Flora had gone to fetch a ribbon from Mrs. Vale. The door remained open, but their voices softened. Hugh stood by the mantel, holding one of Flora's copybooks. She wrote 3 sentences of her own today, he said. She wrote 5. She crossed out 2 because she feared you would dislike them. He looked down at the page. I have made a prison and called it order. Jacquetta heard the cost of that sentence. It was not a confession made to win her, but a verdict passed against himself. Stratton House was designed to produce obedience, he said, not happiness. And you call it discipline, she answered, because the word pain would displease the room. He flinched. The sight of it loosened something in her own chest. Not pity. Recognition. A hand went to her reticule. The broken clasp gave way. The blue letter slid into her palm. Familiar, humiliating. Beloved only because it had lasted. I keep smiling, she said, before courage failed, because my father already worries he raised a daughter too honest to survive. I can bear dismissal. I can bear whispers. I have borne both with tolerable posture. Her voice thinned. She hated that. But I cannot bear being the reason he loses his cottage. I cannot bear seeing the girls' room emptied because I could not learn when to hold my tongue. The smile was gone. Without it, her face felt naked. This is what truth costs me, Your Grace, and I am very tired of pretending the price is no heavier than a jest. Hugh looked at the blue paper, then at her fingers. He did not take it or make a speech from it. He only lifted his hand and stopped short of touching hers. The question was in the pause. Jacquetta moved first. Just enough. His fingers covered the edge of the paper and brushed the back of her hand. The touch was brief, proper, and devastating. Footsteps sounded in the passage. Hugh stepped back before scandal could be born. Mr. Dunmore appeared in the doorway, with Lady Felicity behind him. Neither pretended they had not seen the distance closing before it opened again. "Your Grace," Dunmore said smoothly. "The parish trustees assemble at the Guildhall tomorrow after morning service. The question of the girls' school lease must be settled. Lady Felicity's uncle has agreed to speak for a more suitable arrangement." "A suitable arrangement?" Jacquetta asked. Lady Felicity's gaze flicked to the blue paper. "One that does not place girls under the care of a woman unable to remember the difference between frankness and forwardness." Hugh's face hardened. The man from the dinner table returned all command and frost. "The matter will be heard properly," he said. Jacquetta felt the door close inside him. Mr. Dunmore bowed. "As your Grace wishes." After they left, Hugh did not look at her. "I will not let them insult you in my house," he said. "But in the Guildhall?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "Public matters require public order." There it was, the retreat. Not absence. Worse. Duty. Jacquetta folded the blue letter along its crease. "Of course, Your Grace." He looked as if the title struck him. She curtsied and left before her smile could return and make a liar of her again. The strike came an hour before the meeting. Jacquetta had just tied her bonnet when a maid brought word that Mr. Dunmore requested her in the small drawing room. Her father was not there. Hugh was not there. Only Dunmore and Lady Felicity waited beside a sheet of heavy cream paper, a confession already written. Dunmore tapped it with 2 fingers. "You will sign, Miss Redmond. It states that you misunderstood. His Grace's comments at dinner exceeded your station during your residence here, and resign your position at the parish school for the preservation of proper female instruction." Lady Felicity's voice was soft. "No one wishes your father harmed. Sign, and his cottage remains secure. The school may continue under my patronage, with a better governess." Jacquetta read the first line. It was beautiful in its neatness. A lie could be very elegant if one had enough education. "I have not resigned." "You will," Dunmore said. Lady Felicity stepped closer, the scent of violets clinging coldly to her silk. "Do you know why you must be removed, Miss Redmond? It is not because you are clever. Clever women may be useful if they understand the walls around them." Jacquetta said nothing. Lady Felicity's eyes hardened. "It is because he watches you. A duke does not watch a parish teacher in that manner, unless the order of the house is already broken." For the first time, Lady Felicity sounded less amused than afraid. Then the fear vanished beneath polish. "You must see that this is kindness," she continued. "A public refusal will not raise you. It will only make you notorious." Notorious? For telling girls they might think, for answering a rude man before she knew his title, for failing to look grateful while being erased. Jacquetta took the paper. Dunmore mistook the movement for surrender. A wise choice. Hugh entered then. He saw the paper. He saw Jacquetta's face. He saw too much, as usual, and still not enough. "What is this?" he asked. "Prudence," said Dunmore. "Miss Redmond is prepared to correct the disorder she has caused." Hugh came forward, and for one sharp second, Jacquetta thought he would tear the paper himself. His anger filled the room so quickly, even Lady Felicity stepped back. "Prepared," he said. Jacquetta's fingers tightened. Dunmore lifted his chin. "Your Grace, a woman in Miss Redmond's situation survives by knowing her place. She is a paid instructor, not a companion to power." Hugh's eyes went dark. "Say that again." "Your Grace?" "Say it again, where she can hear you, and I can decide what sort of man I have allowed to advise me." Dunmore swallowed. The silence shook. Then Hugh looked at the paper, at Lady Felicity, at Jacquetta, and at the invisible weight of a dead father's portrait hanging over everything he had ever done. His shoulders locked. "The meeting will proceed," he said. "In public. No private coercion." It was protection. It was not enough. He turned and left to prepare the very order that might destroy her. Jacquetta stood with the confession in her hand. Lady Felicity leaned close. "Do not mistake his interest for freedom. Men like His Grace admire fire until it threatens the house." Jacquetta folded the paper once, then again. "I will answer in the Guildhall," she said. This time, she did not smile. The Stratton Guildhall had never held so much breath. Tenants crowded the benches, mothers stood along the wall with daughters pressed against their skirts. The trustees sat near the front, grave and uncomfortable. Jacquetta's father stood at the back, hat crushed between his hands, begging her with his eyes to survive, even if survival required surrender. Hugh stood on the raised dais. Lady Felicity sat to his right, pale and composed. Mr. Dunmore stood at a lectern with the satisfaction of a man who had arranged every chair in the room and expected human hearts to follow. Jacquetta took her place below them. She could feel the blue letter in her reticule and the folded confession in her glove. One paper told how other houses had named her. The other waited to show how this house would bury her. Dunmore began gently. That was his skill. He spoke of order, female delicacy, the Duke's generosity, and the danger of filling poor girls with discontent. He never called Jacquetta wicked. He did worse. He called her unsuitable. Lady Felicity rose next. "A woman who cannot govern her tongue," she said, "cannot be trusted to govern young minds. Miss Redmond has mistaken indulgence for approval. We must not allow village girls to learn the same error." A murmur moved through the room. Jacquetta looked at her father. His face was wet, though he made no sound. Hugh's hands were clenched at his sides. Dunmore turned to her with a courteous inclination. "Miss Redmond has prepared a statement." There was the trap. If she signed, her father kept his roof. If she refused, he might lose it. If she spoke, the girls might hear her fall. Jacquetta drew the folded confession from her glove. For one heartbeat, she could not move. Her father's cottage rose before her mind. The low ceiling, the mended chair, the little garden where he had tried to grow roses for her mother and produced mostly thorns. She saw the schoolroom, empty. She saw Flora's face closing again. Too forward with opinions. Her fingers trembled. The room waited for her to save herself by disappearing. Jacquetta unfolded the confession. Then she tore it in two. The sound was small. The gasp was not. She tore it again, because once was refusal, and twice was choice. "I did speak out of turn," she said. Her voice shook on the first word. She let it. A steady voice was not the same as courage. "I spoke at my father's table, because a gentleman had dismissed girls he had never troubled to know. I would do so again. Dunmore stepped forward. Miss Redmond, no, sir. She turned to him. You have had your proper language. You have dressed fear in good paper and called it virtue. Now I shall answer plainly. A few women along the wall lifted their heads. Jacquetta looked at the girls, at Flora sitting between Mrs. Vale and a village child, white-faced but watching. A girl taught only obedience grows into a woman who mistakes fear for goodness. I teach reading, so girls will not be blind to the words used against them. I teach sums so they may know when they are cheated. I teach speech, so silence may be a choice, not a prison. Her throat burned. If that makes me unfit, then I am unfit. But I will not sign a lie to make my honesty convenient. She reached into her reticule and drew out the blue half-sheet. This is what other houses called me. She held it high enough for the front row to see the crossed lines. Too forward with opinions. They meant it as a stain. I have decided to keep it as a credential. The words landed, not loudly, deeply. Flora stood. She was trembling. Mrs. Vale reached for her sleeve, but the girl shook her head. Miss Redmond asked me what colour Lisbon was, Flora said in a small voice that grew stronger because no one stopped it. I thought there was no answer. Then I learned there could be. Mine, Lady Felicity, went rigid. Hugh moved at last. He did not rush to stand in front of Jacquetta, as if she were a shield he needed to replace. He stepped down from the dais and stood beside her, slightly behind where every eye could see the choice, without mistaking whose courage had begun it. Mr. Dunmore speaks of order, Hugh said. His voice carried to the rafters. Lady Felicity speaks of virtue. I have been raised among both, and I have seen how easily both may become cowardice when stripped of mercy. Dunmore blanched. Your Grace, this woman has manipulated enough! The word cracked through the hall. Hugh turned to the trustees. The lease for the parish girls' school will be renewed for 21 years at a peppercorn rent. The account will be entered before the next quarter day. Mr. Redmond's tenancy will be confirmed separately and may not be touched by any steward seeking revenge on his daughter. The hall erupted in whispers. Dunmore staggered back as if struck. Your Grace, you cannot conduct estate business by sentiment. No, Hugh said. I conducted by authority. Sentiment is what allowed me to ignore cowardice, because it wore my father's habits. He faced Lady Felicity. There will be no announcement of an engagement between us. Lady Felicity's composure broke. For her, Hugh's eyes went to Jacquetta, but he spoke to the room. For honour, and for the woman who taught me what the word ought to mean. A hush fell. Jacquetta's heart lurched, not because he had chosen her publicly, but because he had not made her small to do it. He turned to her then. Miss Redmond, he said the title, careful, the question open. The school remains yours, if you wish it. Not as charity, not under correction. On your own terms, with trustees who will answer to you as well as to me. She saw the offer for what it was, not rescue. A door. She could walk through. She could refuse. He would not drag her either way. Jacquetta looked at her father. He was crying openly now. Then she looked at Flora, at the village girls, at the torn confession on the floor. Finally, she looked at Hugh. I will remain for the girls, she said. His face altered, a pain so brief it was almost invisible. He had expected nothing else. Perhaps he thought he deserved nothing else. Jacquetta let the silence hold one heartbeat longer, and she added, her voice softer. "If you can bear to be corrected often, Your Grace, I will remain for you." The hall did not cheer. This was Hampshire, not a theatre. But a long-held breath released. A mother drew her daughter closer. Mrs. Vale pressed her hand to her mouth. Flora smiled, as if the world had made room. Hugh bowed to Jacquetta, not as a duke accepting gratitude, as a man receiving an answer. Weeks later, the East schoolroom was no longer a quiet corner of Stratton House where timid girls learned to disappear. It was noisy. Slate pencils scratched, pages turned. Someone laughed almost every hour. Flora argued with a map and won. Village girls came twice a week and left with ink on their fingers and questions on their tongues. Mr. Dunmore resigned before he could be dismissed. Lady Felicity departed for Bath. Mr. Redmond's lease was sealed, witnessed, and tucked in the parish chest, where no frightened father need hold it like a prayer. Hugh did not court Jacquetta as if he were rewarding himself for courage. He came slowly. He walked with her after lessons, always in public, with Flora or Mrs. Vale near enough to satisfy every rule and frustrate every gossip. He sent books for the girls and accepted every correction Jacquetta made in his proposed improvements. He learned to knock before entering the schoolroom. He learned that silence could be peace rather than command. One afternoon, he brought her a new reticule clasp. It was silver, plain and strong. "I noticed the old one gave way," he said, almost stiffly. Jacquetta turned it over in her palm. "A dangerous habit, Your Grace." "Which?" Noticing. He looked at her. Then the reserve, still there, but no longer a wall. More like a door he had learned to open from the inside. "I have been late to it," he said. "I mean to improve." She smiled. Not brightly, not usefully, but because happiness had crossed the room and asked permission to sit down. On the first page of the new school ledger, Jacquetta pasted the blue half-sheet of paper. The crossed-out insults remained visible. Beneath them, in Hugh's black, decisive hand, was written, "The first honest report Stratton House ever received." That evening, the long dining table was set again, with candles, silver, and dark red wine. Jacquetta sat beside Hugh, not at the far end. Her father sat across from her, still amazed by the plate before him. Flora argued with a visiting curate about Lisbon and declared it sounded yellow. Hugh listened gravely and asked why. The answer was long and entirely her own. Jacquetta lifted her glass. The table no longer felt like a place where she must earn permission to speak. It was not a court waiting to condemn her, nor a stage on which she must perform cheerfulness to survive. It was only a table, warm with candlelight, marked by old scratches, crowded with imperfect people, learning not to mistake quiet for goodness or obedience for love. Hugh looked at her over the candles, and she saw again the man from that first night. Not the rude guest, not the duke, but the lonely figure behind both. This time her father did not whisper a warning. This time Jacquetta spoke because she wished to. "To inconvenient truths," she said. Hugh's mouth curved. "And to the cost of speaking them," he replied, "which shall not be paid alone." The candle flames leaned toward them, bright and steady.